This is the Awkward Handshake, a podcast about networking, business, and what really happens in the room.
We're unpacking the good, the bad, and the awkward so you can build better connections and get paid.
Let's get into it. It's our favorite topic today. You and I are both very big fans of romance novels and literature. We're going to talk all about romance. I wonder, because today we have the owner of Grand Gesture Books in Portland, and we're going to send everybody into that interview in just a moment. But one of the big things that came up in our conversation with Katherine was what specifically reading romance as a genre can do for you when it comes to networking and business, because there's this emotional component that is needed. There's really important concepts around consent and around desirability and conversation and being able to have a conversation. Like, how many times have we been talking this season about how conversation skills and social skills are desperately needed? And we cannot blame it all on COVID.
And you see it all the time where somebody is just, you don't know how often they get out of the house, because it doesn't like very often.
Who let you out?
That's right.
Did you escape? But I loved this angle. I mean, you and I don't need to be convinced to read romance. And we've even had a local group of friends in a very heavily romance reading book club. But romance as a genre is typically one of the most purchased genres ever. It is not just that it is having a heyday right now, which it is. It's having a very big zeitgeisty kind of moment, but it is historically always the most popular genre. And we cannot say it's like, oh, it's just the pink bodice ripper Harlequin romance cover type things. We've got all different genders and ages and so many types of inclusivity included in this genre now. And that emotional lesson that you learn through it about connection making in its perhaps highest form, most intimate form, can surprisingly teach you a lot about how you operate in the world.
Yeah, and I think it teaches you communication because, interestingly enough, what I've been able to glean, the one trope people hate the most is miscommunication. We all hate a miscommunication trope because you're like, if you watch it on the TV, you're like throwing your pillow and you're like, just tell him X. And you could divert all of this angst and missed opportunities. I think it helps people, especially now, and I hate the trope at the moment in romantasy where they are connected via the mind and they don't have to use their words because the other person knows what they're thinking. That leads people into terrible places because one is consent. Do you give you permission to be in my head? But two, I think it doesn't set you up well to say what you want, say what you need, and make sure that it is done clearly. And you can't just expect somebody to know you run a business when you come into a networking thing. You can't expect that you have room for clients. You can't expect them to be like, oh, you're the most amazing person I've ever found. We don't know anything that you need or want, and you're really going to have to communicate it.
So what you're telling me is all the people who have a kink for mind reading tropes need to do a little inner reflection, because your love of that part of the storyline is probably reflecting somewhere else out in your real life world, and maybe is contributing to some of the friction where you're like, how come people just don't know that I exist? Or how come people just don't know fill in the blank?
Yeah, I understand the appeal of I don't need to work at it. I don't need to effort. Somebody should just know. But we don't live in that world. So put on the big girl pants and say what you need.
Dare I say these are complaints that people have in networking? The effort of having to go to a place, the effort of having to explain what you do again and again.
When really you should see it as the opportunity to A/B test. Did it land the way I want? And if it didn't, okay, I've got a miscommunication trope because they thought I'd do X, but really I do Y.
Oh, it's so not sexy.
No, because they'll give you a job offer thing, like a gig, and you're like, I can't. No, that's not what I do at all. Or you'll cave and be like, sure, I can do that. And
then you're miserable.
Absolutely miserable.
Let's introduce Katherine, because her conversation, I mean, we could have talked with Katherine for hours. We could talk to Katherine for days. She had so many good mic drop moments, so many words of wisdom to share as a local business owner. So today on the podcast, we have Katherine D. Morgan, who is the author of the debut chapbook, No Self-Respecting Woman. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming at Huffington Post, Bitch Media, LitHub, The Rumpus, and Hello Giggles, among others. Katherine's work has been nominated for the 2 Best of Net awards. She lives in Portland, Oregon, where she is the owner of Grand Gesture Books, one of our favorite book bookstores here in town. It was so amazing that she came to the studio to come and record because she has a retail shop with retail hours and she's a very busy person.
Yes.
So with that, thank you, Katherine, for coming on. And here's the episode. Katherine, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we are so excited because you are the only guest on our season who has a brick and mortar. And as a fellow brick and mortar owner, I love this so much. But then also, you're like Megan's dream guest this season because she is writing a rom-com. I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
It's going to be a good time.
We wanted to kick things off and really talk about community because when we're talking about networking, it's so much about community. You can't connect with people if you're not in community. You serve a very niche audience. You have a fan base legitimately in your store, but then there's also fan bases that read. And I'm just going to kick it off in a very messy sort of fashion here. But like, what do you notice the most that's happening with community and how people are or maybe aren't connecting? Because you see it in your store, I would assume.
I would say the biggest thing I notice about community is that people don't often realize that it takes a lot of effort to be in community. Like, I think that a lot of people want to be in community, where it's like they aren't willing to also show up for other people when they're needed. And so I feel like people love to be in community, but they want to do it as one-sided almost. And it can get really tiring. I speak as like a bookstore owner, but like people were very much like they want to come into the store. They want you to sell their book. They want to do all these things. And you're like, okay, I've never seen you before. And it's just not a thing where it's like, they're just visiting, but they're like, they never seen you before. They may not be supporting you on social media. And then you're kind of like, well, why should I support you? It's a business partnership, really. And people often forget that. And then with the community-based events, like, we get asked to do a lot of events and it's wonderful. It makes me so happy. It's also really tiring and it's a lot of work and people don't realize it. They don't think about all the logistics that go into doing these things, but it's always rewarding when it happens and people are like, oh my God, we get people who are like, they might be attending their first ever book event and it's with us. That always makes me so happy. It's just like people wanting to come and see and experience things. And it's also people who, they might be like really shy about coming and they're like, okay, is it okay if I come alone? And we're like, yes. And sometimes we like ask people like, hey, if you're sitting alone, raise your hand, mingle with the person next to you, do all these things. And we've had people who actually have come back with other people from events and they'll recognize others. And so, yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot of both selflessness and it's a lot of having to put yourself out there. And the rejection's hard, of course, but that's what it means to be in community. Because you could be in community and be doing it wrong, or you could be in the wrong community because it's not the community that's for you. And so it's figuring out how to be in community, but also how to show up and put yourself out there.
We've talked about it earlier on this season. Some of it's performative.
Very performative.
Where it's like, oh, I'm so happy I found this space. But really, you're there to take.
And it's so funny because people will be like, oh, I'm so happy we found this. And it's like, you can kind of feel the like energy being weird, and they're like,
the energy dips.
Yeah,
it dips because I get the same thing. People are like, "Oh, I'm so happy I finally found a studio," and I can see the thoughts like a ticker tape across their forehead, and I'm like, "You're thinking, how do I get your space for free? How do I do something with you?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" But when you foster community, I mean, I think the returns always are greater than the takers.
It's always like it's just a lot nicer because then you're like, okay, cool. This person isn't necessarily using me. They want to see me succeed as much as I want them to succeed. So us, for example, a lot of the events that we do are for authors who engage with us the most. And it doesn't always mean they buy stuff from us, but they might be shouting us out on social media all the time, or they come in and they're like, oh, I'd love to buy, they buy stickers, they buy things like that. We're not gonna lie, books are expensive, we all know it, but the effort into seeing our store succeed, and we are always excited about doing the same thing for them.
And you host so many events.
A lot.
Month.
Girl, your calendar is
I saw
packed.
the calendar. Yeah.
Last year was so, we hosted 85 authors our first year that we were open.
Oh my God.
And then we were packing the
It's
months.
more than one a week.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
There was multiples a week at times. And then finally this year, I was like, I can't. We get to be a lot pickier now. And that is a very interesting notion. But it also means that if things don't go right, we just go, we'll try again some other time. And then I am also now someone who loves a canceled plan or a canceled event. So I'm like, oh, thank God. I'm tired.
How do you find all the authors? Do they approach you or is it like half and half? Especially in the first year.
Yeah, I mean, a little little bit of everything. Publishers reach out to us, the publicists always do. And, or if it's something where it's like an author might have come into our store, they want to talk about possibly doing an event. Or we see an author who's like maybe in the neighboring town, see someone from Seattle, and they're releasing a book event. And we pitch them. So it's like most of the time authors pitch us. A lot of times we go on what's called Edelweiss in the book world, and we submit event grids, is what they're called. And it's basically just being like, okay, how many people do I think would show up for this event? Do I think people would show up for this event? How many books do I think I could sell? Why would I want to host this? Like that kind of thing. So basically you're just like writing a report. So it's a mix of everything, and you're like fielding. Like sometimes you're fielding like no events for a while, and then suddenly you get like 3 in like a week, and you're like, okay, I have to also space these out, because if you're doing so many big events, then you're like, okay, the money has to be there, because it's a lot. It's very expensive.
I think it was so interesting too what you said about like that, are you going to be a part of the community or not? Because when I started writing my book and then figuring out I'm going to run this subscription club, and I was like, okay, I might want these things to exist in bookstores, because there's so many in romance bookstores now that I think Seattle opened 4 in this past year.
A lot.
And I found yours, and the first thing that I knew was like, okay, I followed you, and I was like, I need to get to know them, because you're right. I can't just say like, take my book. Like that's so rude. And so instead it's like, I need to get to know them. I need to go to their events. I need to share whatever they're sharing. I think you shared your engagement. So it was like, we got to stay up to date on this. And it just never occurred to me, to just
We've had
do a fly by night and be like, but my stuff.
Authors do that before. Or like this one author came in, and she was like, she looked at she and her friends looked at the section where I guess her book would have been. And then she came by me and like handed me her card, and she was like, when you want to stock my books, like let me know. And then she like sauntered out of the store. And when I tell you, I immediately threw that business card away. I was like, what are we gonna do with this? And then we've had authors who just like come in. You can always tell when they want to speak to the owner.
Yeah.
And then they're like, here's my book. I did a thing. Da 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 da. And you're like, okay, cool. And then you're also like, okay, describe your book to me. And then they flounder, and you're like, what makes you think I can sell it if you can't sell it? Like, and then sorry to say, sometimes there's a bad cover on it, and you're like, I can't. Like, there's this one book where I'm not gonna name it, but there's this one book. The premise sounds so great, and it has one of the worst fucking covers I've ever seen. So bad. I will never tell that person. Someone should. It can't be me, but someone should, because every time I see it, I just go, ugh.
The fan base of readers is fascinating to me. And I remember when you were opening and teeny tiny amount of word got out, and people were like, new bookstore's opening. There's going to be a romance bookstore down in Portland. And we were so excited for this. And I think when it comes to business people, who are most of the people listening to this podcast and the networking crowd, I think like people, when they're looking for a good network, they're looking for essentially a miniature fan base. I think there's a lot to be learned from the bookish community in this sense. So basically everyone needs to hang out at your store.
And buy stuff. Don't just hang out there.
Yeah. But like actually get into, the hobby of reading and engage with the community so that you can understand the nuts and bolts of how somebody becomes enthralled by a particular genre, or even just friends within the community. And I'm just wondering, like, if you notice you're a business owner and you're also a fan of reading, clearly. Do you notice any crossover in those skill sets? Because I'm always looking for those crossover areas. Like from between being like a fan in a reader community and being a good networker?
I think that there is a crossover usually, because romance is one of those genres where it's like, it's a heavy recommendation genre. Yeah. You have to talk to people. I used to actually work at Powell's Books. And what I loved was when I was running the romance section was like, people would stop in the section, they'd be chatting, they would be recommending books to each other. And that's what happens a lot in my store, where it's like, people will see people across the room and be like, oh my God, I love that book. And they'll just like, gab about it. And I think that translates well, because it's just like a simple way to build the community. I do think 2 things. It's like, people always say that like reading is solitary and like writing is solitary. And I'm always like, yeah, both of those things can be done alone. You can also write in groups. You can also, join a book club, do whatever. But the actual reading you could do that alone. But it's like, what happens afterwards? Who are you sharing your thoughts with? And that's why I think that like, platforms like Goodreads, that's why I think it's why it's so popular, because it's like you're sharing thoughts. You're like, you can see what your friends are reading. I think that that like, I love Storygraph, but you don't have that community aspect as much because there's no comment section in there. I think that readers who love chatting and experiencing things with others are definitely the people who are better at building community. I think they're better at sharing and like talking about why they don't like things, or, and like reading is so subjective and loving things is so subjective. And, there's been romance novels where like I have not liked them and my friends would have been like, we love them, but it leads to an interesting discussion and we're not taking it personally. And that's the same thing. It's like, there's music and books and other things that you love that someone else may not like. I think that leads to a more how you're going to handle a business well. Because with the fan base, we have a fan base for the store. People are very encouraging towards our store and they love it. And then, I have a fan base as well because I am the owner of the store and I'm very online, as the kids say. But also my staff is also getting fan bases. People will come in and ask for like Rex by Meg or by Nikki, by Andy. Like it's just like
cool.
And they'll see the names on the shelf talking and be like, oh, okay, like love this one. So like I'm gonna read the next one that Meg loved. Different things like that, where I feel like that's the more community building that I see that goes really well. I think it could be a lot more stressful than it is, where it's just like you just being like, I love this book. Who can I talk about with this book? Have you read this book? Like that kind of thing, as opposed to this like big blooming process that everyone kind of figures out.
They're super connectors.
You know what else I'm hearing? It's trust. And I don't think we've ever talked about trust with super connectors. This concept of super connectors has come up multiple times this season already. And you're talking about it in this like full circle moment here, talking about the reading community. But everything you were describing involves trust. If you get a recommendation from someone, you trust them enough to give it a chance, even if you don't end up liking the same thing that they like. But then you find people that you trust more and more and more. And you're like, I would like Meg's recommendations or whoever's. It's like a layering process. You can't go from zero to trust in like one thing.
No.
Like it's repeated exposure. And I'm really thinking like when it comes to, because you're one of our, you are our last guest this whole season.
Woohoo, trophies for you.
We have hindsight now on all the previous discussions and guests who've been on here this season. And it seems these themes through the reading community might be summing up best what good networking is. And you might think, oh, it's just readings or it's just books. But it's not. It's the nuts and bolts of what makes connection happen.
And like there's a lot to have a more, because we're a more niche store, our trust is also different because people come into the romance store and they have baggage. People tell us things that they might not have told their friends, or they, they're just looking for some kind of comfort. And there's also that trust where it's like, it almost feels like people always joke that like booksellers are therapists in a way, because people come in and like, I remember after the 2016 election, I was really down sad and I ended up going to Powell's and just wandering the stacks, and I just needed to be around people but not necessarily talking to them. And I think that that's a lot of what the store does for people. We will approach you if you want us to approach you. You could, like I always tell people, like you could tell us whatever you like, but there is a lot of trust in that scenario. And that's why one of the things is I'm very strict with what I recommend. Like there are some books where I'm just like, I've heard this is good, here you go. But like the things that I love, I value a lot. And so I am less likely to recommend things. Like I'll recommend something if I'm like, yes, like this is what I love. This was really funny. It doesn't mean it's always a 5-star read. Like I've recommended books where I was like, this was dumb, but I had a great time.
Yeah.
And like, this was just just a great little time. And that's still the same thing where it's like, you can trust whenever you come into our store, or you should trust whenever you come into our store or other spaces that like we have your best intentions. Like, yes, we're trying to sell books because, we're a bookstore, but I'm not going to sell you something where it could be harmful for you, or you could like not end up like, it's just something where I'm like, I just need to move this off the shelf. Like, it's not going to be that kind of thing that I'm doing. But yeah, I think that like trust is a really big factor in a lot of things. And it should be, because that's how, you build a community by becoming closer to people, and there needs to be that element of trust.
Yeah. I mean, my brain instantly goes to like the trigger warnings, right? Mm-hmm. There's that trust that you recommend this, and I can see where this genre is unusual in that like maybe I've had a really bad relationship and I don't want to see any signs of that in the next few books that I need to read. And so I want to know like there's no violence against women. There's no like this, and it is putting yourself in a vulnerable position and trusting that person is not going to like re-expose you intentionally. I've had so many books.
In our book club, we have this phrase now. We're like, that should have been an inside thought.
Yep.
We're like, what did I just read?
And I think that needs to be figured out before you write the book. Because like, as a writer myself, I'm like, what are you trying to say? What are you hoping that comes across? And then go from there. Because if you're writing, you're just like, you just want to have a fun little goofy time. That's fine. Enjoy that.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you can't make it seem more serious than it is when you're like, this is not it.
Well, I feel like that's where the trust trust comes into play because indie publishing is so much easier to accomplish now. So the bar to entry is lower. So you really do need to rely on trusted resources to give you some data. It's not always going to be right, as we know, but it'll at least help you sift through more of it. I think that is so important because authors also need to really consider why they're creating something. It makes me think of the business community. Like, why are you making this particular business? Like, have you done the forethought? And I just think there's such a nice parallel thought experiment between
why.
Yeah, because when I was doing the market research with you and Tori, I was like, where do you find your next reads? And my friend Tori was like, well, it's not from Instagram anymore because I've been burned too many times.
Yes.
And some people are like, it has to have like 4 stars on Goodreads to even be like considered.
I feel like the perfect amount is actually a 3.5.
Yeah.
Like anything above a 3.5 because it's like a 4-star. I feel like those are the books that could maybe burn me more.
Those ones I'm worried about because sometimes they're just a little bit culty.
A little too
And then,
much.
then like most of the recommendations come from friends. And I think, again, that's kind of that super connector of like, you're at a networking event. You're like, hey, or you tap your network and you're like, I need somebody who does X. You're going to trust your friend who's like, I got this person, she does this. You're going to go to them.
One of my friends just messaged me yesterday and she's like, I need a book that will like gut me emotionally. And I suggested 2 of them. And she was like, okay, great, I bought them. And I was like, excellent. I was like, you're going to go for a wild ride with both of them? I was like, this is the books that I recommended. And one was a romance, one was a thriller. But I was like,
She's going through it.
Yeah, no, I was like, baby, you okay? I read Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. And then that's the book where like I finished it. I cried. It was all I could think about for weeks. And I posted on our Instagram stories that day. And I was like, I just read this book and I'm devastated. And and then 2 people came in later that day and they were like, we saw the book you talked about. We do need to read it now. So then I was like, okay, great. Trust it. And then like one of the girls came back and she was like, you were right. It hurt me. And I was like, it did. And then Anita was like, oh, they're so wonderful. But they're just like, oh my God, thank you. And I was like, yeah, it hurt.
We're going to have a support group. It's going to be.
Yeah, we're reading it for book club next month.
Look at the community.
Yeah. And I'm excited. I'm like, yeah, we're going to go in our feelings.
You're going to bring tissues.
The store is stocked.
Yeah. You get a box. You
get
get a box.
If you don't cry, you're out of the club.
Well, that segues well into the events that you hold.
Yes. I mean, you really do listen to your community a lot. We were talking before this that, bookstores tend to have, especially modern bookstores, tend to have sort of a typical slate lineup of types of events, but you really listen. Like you're even hosting weddings in your space now. And I think that's pretty special.
Yeah, it's which was one of my goals actually when I started the store. Like I'm a big fan of Say Yes to the Dress. I won't lie. A lot of the requests we get, because we have to balance it, right? Like a lot of our book events are usually free, but there are quite a few events where we have to be like, this costs $50 to attend. And $50 right now in this economy is a lot. And so we try to balance it out a lot with like cheaper / free events. There are events where it's like, this is actually like kind of, it's a $50 event. Those are usually more like the off-site events that we have to pay someone to like rent their space. But we also host, we just hosted a clothing swap recently. We try to do, I think right now we're supposed to be hosting a book drive for like a woman's prison. So we're like planning on doing that shortly. So yeah, it's just like a lot of things where people have mentioned it, or like we take a lot of feedback from the community itself where like, we hosted a heated rivalry, craft night. It's very funny because I've neither read nor watched that show. And it's not because I'm like terrible. It's just because I'm like, I only watched the Golden Girls really. But like people had requested that and we listened, and that event, like mind you, that event was like, it was free and we had like 35 spots because it was being hosted in the store, and that event sold out in 30 minutes. Wow. And I was just like, we listen. Like people were like, okay, can you do another one? So now the employee is going to host like another craft night soon. And it's just like things like that where we kind of go, okay, how can we make sure that people are enjoying the events? How can we make sure that like people have the means to do so as well? And like, what does that look like? And for weddings, for that, it usually means like, if we have to, like, for me, it's the only time we charge you is like if we have to close the store. And other than that, it's like, you can bring your friends. You can bring your family. Like, we have 35 chairs. I'm like, if you want to have a micro wedding in the store, sure. Like, it just depends on, like, whatever thing. But, like, we do a lot of elopements because people are just like, okay, it's just, like, me and my partner or, just so, like, just like a smaller group. And we love that. We're like, okay, great. Like we love in all forms and we just celebrate it whenever we can. And so for people to want to declare their love and say that they're going to spend the rest of their lives together, and they ask me to do it in my bookstore, it's like, it's a dream come true. I love it. Like people asked me if I was going to host my wedding in my store, and I was like, 1, no, I work here. I was like, 2, do you think a Catherine Morgan wedding is going to fit in branch? Like, please. But we hosted our engagement party there last weekend, and that was really fun because I got to see the store through like more of like this is like a fun event that's actually for my part, like me and my fiance. And that was really sweet.
Well, I love that you have been using your space as a third space. Mm-hmm. We were talking about that before we hit record and how special it is when you get keys to a brick and mortar. As Megan was saying, you could be like, nobody gets to come in here. But those of us who love community, I don't know, it would feel like cutting the oxygen off in a room. But at the same time, like, this shit ain't for free. Mm-mm. And what I'm wondering is with all the events and the people who come through, like some are free, some are paid, how much of that helps translate into sales? Because like your brick and mortar is very different than mine. Like I'll have conversations and make proposals and then clients come in and record, but like you have retail hours and people come and there's product on the shelves and they buy it. I'm wondering for that heated rivalry event, like how many of those people will maybe grow some trust, come back and make future purchases, or did anybody purchase anything on site? Like how does that work in your space, or how has it been working in your space?
Yeah, I mean, usually with the heated rivalry fund, for example, like, sometimes it was like the first, I actually wasn't there for that event. I was in San Francisco doing something, but my employees were like, people were they were really excited. They bought other stuff. Like, we made sure we had like heated rivalry, like merch. So we had like cute little tote bags and stickers and things like that. And so a lot of that was what was being sold. I think for book events, which are different for us in our opinion, we try to angle and see like how many people are coming. And I'm like, Portland's one of those cities, and I think this is all cities, but Portland is where I live, so whatever. But Portland's one of those cities where like people may not tell you they're coming, but they'll show up. And you're like, okay, well, I can't account for this. And so we tell people on this, like when they're signing up for an event through our store, we're like, okay, great. Even if you're not are planning to buy a book, make sure you at least sign up. Because then I could be like, okay, if this person might buy a book, I could add an extra like 5 copies. There's some times where people think that they'll draw a bigger crowd than they will. And then it's unfortunate because then you're kind of like, now I have all these books and you have 3 friends who showed up for you. And those 3 friends didn't buy anything.
Oh, no.
And that can be really awkward because on one hand, it's awkward for the author because, they're sad and you witness the sadness. Yeah. But on the other hand, you're also having to tell the publicists that nothing sold. There's been a few times where I'm like, this author's really great, but I'm like, I can't host them again because no one will come out for them. And that's really hard. And sometimes it depends on who the author is. It depends on, we're less likely to host events unless they have a good enough audience here where they're out of state. Because at least like with a Portland group, like if you're like, I have 12 friends and like, I know at least 5 will come because they're free. Then you're like, okay, great. Like, sure, we can do that. But if you're like, oh, I'm, from Iowa and like, I don't know anyone here and my book is niche and I already niche category, you're kind of like, okay. And then you're like, well, you have to choose a good conversation partner, and they'll choose like their friend who you're like, that's also not someone who's drawing a crowd. Like it's so much where people don't realize how much goes into it. And that's why like my time is valuable. Yeah. My employees' time is valuable because I have to pay them. I have to make sometimes the hard decisions of being like, I love you, but I can't do this again or do this for you because I don't think anyone will come for you. And that's hard to say to someone, especially like, I usually say it over email, so it's a lot less hard. But yeah. I get it, it's a tough thing. But yeah, I think that it can be a really delicate process in the whole grand scheme. And like we are, people consider us a third space, and we are one. But at the same time, we're a bookstore. We have to make decisions based on the bookstore. Yeah. And I have to make decisions. We're all talking, like me and my friends were talking about this, where it's like, sometimes you have to be like, okay, what do I sell in the store? And then like, how does that work with problematic authors? Like there's some authors where you're like, I don't want to sell you, but you make us a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that money subsidized a lot of other things. And so then you get to be put in this like weird situation where you're trying to decide what to do, but you're like, and I hate to say it, but sometimes it's like, it's really hard. And it's really hard keeping a bookstore open, especially in this day and age. And it's really hard, you know, like it's like people also don't recognize what the book world really is. Like they think that like, you know, I've had customers who thought that like publishers gave me books for free. And I was like, yeah, like someone asked me that.
That
I
was
was like,
great.
I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, don't you just like get this for free and you like charge? First of all, when has that ever been a thing that's happened? Like, I was like, do you not understand? Like, you think that like I'm making $18 off this book that you're like paying for? No. I was like, I would be way more financially stable if that was the case. Like,
Oh my goodness.
and then thing too is like when people, you know, they'll bring up Amazon, not to me because they know not to, but they'll bring up Amazon and do other things and they'll like, you know, talk about that. And I'm like, you don't realize how much goes into it. Like I'm not Amazon. I have a storefront. I have to pay garbage to go out. I have to pay like all these various different accounts. I love my store and I love having a brick and mortar, but it is sometimes you're kind of like, okay, what would have happened if I hadn't done this? Like what would my life look like? And it'd be a lot more sleep-filled nights, to be honest, but it wouldn't be as fun. It wouldn't be as fulfilled, which is how you know I'm a business person because I'm like, is it rewarding? Yes, but also am I so tired and sad? Yes.
Now, this makes me think of so much dialogue we've heard all season about running networking events and the labor that goes into it, a labor of love most of the time.
So much love.
And so much love. And just like the expectations of people who show up who have never done that before. They're just, I think the more all of us have public conversations where they can understand how something is made possible for them, the better community gets. So thank you for being exceptionally honest because just need a lot more of that.
Yeah, and we're always like, we tell customers too, we're always very honest. Like, because the publisher sometimes will be like, your event is like, they'll have someone's book event priced at like $20 and that covers the paperback cost. Yeah. And then I'm like, great. But also now I make no profit because I'm like, well, I have to pay my staff. I have to order the books. I have to order their backstock. I have to order the other authors' stuff. And then I'm like, well, then I also have to put a deposit down on the space. So it's like one of those things. And I tell the publisher when I ask. If customers ask me about it, I tell them. But I'm also like, I show a lot of numbers. Like we hosted, one of my favorite examples is that we hosted this author named Brynne, who was like phenomenal. She was a great event. Love her so much. And because it's a hardcover event. And so we were going to charge like, I think like the book was like maybe $27.99 or something like that. So our price was going to be like $30, $35. And like the Alberta Rose, where we hosted it, the guy sat me down and he was like, you will not make any money off of this. He's like, you need to charge more. And I was like, well, okay. Like, he's like, you should charge at least $45. And I was like, oh, great. And in my mind, I was like, okay, cool. We'll charge $50. And he had some doubts at first. He was like, do you think that people like, because it was about a 400 space. And he was like, do you think you could sell out of this? And I was like, the romance girlies will come for this. And what happened? We sold out of it. And I looked at him and I was like, never doubt me again. And he was like, all right, you're right. And that's the thing. I love telling white men. I'm like, don't ever doubt me. And they were like, okay. And then they go, you're right. And like buying her stock alone, I think because it was like 400 books, buying just the hardcover main book was about $8,000. Oh. And I was like, that was $8,000 of that. There was like a little
tied up in there. Yeah.
$8,000 in that. A little bit of mixture of like a few of her backstock titles were in that mix as well. Cause we would like publishers, we do most of our ordering through Ingram because it's in Roseburg. But like for our publisher, we were like, okay, this is a lot of books and then give a better discount. So I was like, all right, perfect. We'll do that. Wonderful. My card had a limit on it. And it turns out that like, it was like going through, but then it got kind of declined because something else happened. So then we're scrambling. I'm panicking. I'm sweating. I'm like bursting into tears in the bookstore. It's a mess. I have to go home because I'm just like fighting for my life for a minute. And it was like, but it all came together so worth it. And like, we spent about like, I would say like at least $14,000 on that event. And do we have $14,000 at any given time? No. So we had to space out a lot of like payments and money and time and effort and all these things. And it was a wonderful event. Like people were so happy with it. And it was 100% worth it. Like we would do it again. But it was one of those events where I was just like, this is what you guys need to realize is that I can't charge less than this. Like even if it's a paperback, you might be like, oh, she could charge a little bit less. And I probably could if I get a cheaper spot. But sometimes you just got to be like, I'm sorry. Like this is the option. And I can't do it where it's like, oh, you could have a ticket and just not buy a book. So it's a cheaper ticket. And I'm like, no, you're going to do this. And then they'll be like, well, can I bring my friend for support? And I'm like, your friend's not a dog, so no.
They need a ticket too.
They need a ticket too, babes. Your husband as well. I know he's just going to sit in the bar and drink, but he also needs a ticket.
I think it's trying to convey the value. You get to go to this. You're never going to go to this event again. You get to see them. You get to be in a crowd of people who all love the same thing that you do. You're going to make instant friends.
You dress up. Like, people come with little outfits. And
Make it an event.
They come with merch, and they're so happy. And they get to meet the author that they love. And it's like one of those things where I'm like, that's the experience. Like, that's what you're paying for. Like, the book's just included. And that's great. And that's included in the price. But it's like, you know, like, I've met we got to host Katherine D. And that was
so impressive.
huge for us. Like, she had never been to the Pacific Northwest before.
What?
Yeah, we were it was so, when I tell you, I angled for that event for months. Like, I emailed her publicist in December, and I was like, how do we get Katherine D. here? And her publicist was like, it's Katherine, it's almost Christmas. Like, we're going to have to talk in January. And I was like, great. And we didn't get that event technically finalized until April, and she came in May. Katherine D. as a Black woman. And I don't know if they just didn't know the numbers or they just didn't know who would come. But I was like, I can do this event. And I was like, even if somehow 60 people come, even then, you know, we could still do this event. And I angled and I worked so hard on that event, and we sold out. And it was like 285 people. It was this wonderful event. People were crying. People flew from Detroit to come to the event because they were like, the other stops have sold out. So they were like, I can go to Portland. Let's see Portland for the first time. And it was like a room full of Black women, which in Portland does not happen. And it was one of the greatest achievements of my life. Like, people were like, what are you doing? Like, who's your next author you want to host? And I was like, baby, I hosted Katherine D. I was like,
I could die today.
I tell people, like, sometimes we like post events and people are like, oh my God, you got this author? And I tell people, I'm like, I'm feeding you. I am feeding you so many good events, and you should be so happy. And this is the cost that goes for feeding events. I'm sorry, but if you want your favorite author to come here, just because people will post some comments and be like, oh my God, I wish they were coming to Portland. I wish they would come to Portland. And it's like, great. I need to know that you want this person to come to Portland, even next time, because I don't know that. Yeah. She may not sell super well in our store. But like, if you or like other people are like, Portland, where's Portland? Then I'm like, now I know. Now I can make that request. Because there's some authors where I'm like, they may not sell well in the store. I don't personally know them, but the people are hyped. And I'm just like, you know what? Sure. And we get the event and people come out.
I think the other thing too is like, people really need to reframe in their mind, how much do you spend for a concert? Do you get anything for free?
No.
Do you get no, there's no merch. You get a seat, but you might not get to sit.
We've talked about this in the Metro Portland region.
This is a juicy question.
Ooh.
But value. There's value behind these things. We have noticed, because Megan and I, we became Yes Friends, and we were like, oh, this has a ticket attached. And sometimes we talk about it. Like, some things it's like, oh, I can't afford that right now or whatever. But if it's within a certain price range, we're both like, yes, I'm buying the ticket. Like, we want to go to that thing. We'll go together.
We went to BookCon.
We flew across the country to BookCon. So I don't understand why in this area there's such a problem with pricing. Anything over $20 is expensive. And I'm like,
we come from like LA and the Bay.
Yeah.
So like, we're just used to
I'm just kind of like,
the money flows.
my brothers and sisters in Christ, do you know what year of the Lord we are living in, and the expense of inflation?
I'm like, one cocktail will cost you $20.
You want community, you want connection, you want, in the case of the business world, you want some clients, some leads. Sometimes you can get into a room for free, but if it's free, you are the product. And if it's paid, you get more. And there's a cost to making that opportunity available for the person who has gone to the literal expense, like you do, of putting something together. Why do you think that it's so hard up here? You had people flying from Detroit. I dare say, I bet there were people here who were like, oh, I don't think I can do that. And yet somebody bought a plane ticket and got a hotel room and came from Detroit to see Katherine D. I just wonder, do you notice anything owning a bookstore with a very specific clientele?
I feel like it's more the line of thought where it's like, what all can I get for this?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people want a whole smorgasbord of things. And I think it's also too like how not everyone wants to meet their favorite author, which is fine. It just depends on how much you think something is worth to you personally. Like, there's some times where I'll go to a book event and the book is attached, or, you know, and I'm like, okay, like, I love this author. And I think that Portland has a community where there is a lot of free things to do. Like, you know, Pals will host a ton of free events. Always Here will host a lot of free events. So there's a lot of free stuff to do. But then people, I think, also have to remember that, like, with the free stuff, there comes things where it's like you have to pay. And I think that, like, there's always someone willing to pay. And what always happens to me is that people will get really stoked about the idea of things, and then it comes out, they, you know, maybe they don't want to pay, maybe they don't have the money, whatever, and then the event gets sold out, and then they're like, oh, I wish I could have gone. I was like, well, you could have. I sent you the link. And you could have bought the ticket, but you didn't want to. And also Portland, love Portland, but it's a flaky town. People love the flake. And so people will be like, okay, cool, I'll buy a ticket and I just won't go. And then I'm like, why would you spend the $50 and not go? Just like, it depends on all what you're hoping to get out of the experience. Like, I have friends who like, they'll go to an author event and they'll pay for it. And they don't care about meeting the author. They care about getting the signed book. And that's great. And that's a very different experience. And I think that like people also have the time and they will decide on what is worth for them. There's a lot of things where it's like, for example, my fiance hates standing in line for things. My favorite Portlandia episode is about standing in line at brunch because I am someone who I'm like, okay, I'll stand. I got time. And he hates standing because for him, he's like, it's just not worth it. He's like, there's no place in this city where I would stand in line and it'd be worth it. Because he's like, why would I stand here when I could just go to my second favorite place? Like, it's just that kind of thing happening. So a lot of people were like, like I may not want to go to the event, but I know that like Grand Gestures will have assigned copies later on. So I'll just go there and get that there. But also, and that most likely happens, but there are some times where I'm like, we have 5 copies left because we sold so much at the event and then we don't have anything after that. So I think it's more of just like determining what's worth it to you, which is fine. Like that's a you conversation you can have with you, your God, and your bank account. But I don't need to be involved in that conversation. But there's also a conversation to be had. It's like how much of what it is worth is also worth supporting the place that's putting it on. If you have the means, and let's say, because we also do a thing where it's like, if you buy a book and let's say you get sick and you're like, oh, I can't go anymore. We'll hold your book or we can ship it to you. You have to pay the shipping, but we'll hold your book. And so that's the thing. And people will be like, oh, I was so excited to support you, but I got sick and all these things. And I'm like, you did support us. You bought a ticket and and I'm sending the book to you. So and they always are surprised that we still give them the book. And I was like, why would you be surprised? Like they're just like,
paid for it.
Yeah. They're always like, oh, I thought you would have sold it to someone else. And I was like, no, your ticket came with it. And I don't know who hurt you, but that's rough. That's a rough idea. But it's like things like that where it's like, we've had people who will buy a ticket and they'll be like, I can't come, but I like want to support. Or like, we ship to different areas and they'll be like, I want a signed copy from you because I know you're a bookstore. And they're like, but can you ship it to Kansas? And I'm like, yeah, USPS exists. I could do whatever. But yeah, it's just like, it's figuring all that out, asking yourself that question, which also comes back to, the idea of community. And also what is it worth to you to be a part of this? And if it's worth nothing, that's fine. But also if it's worth something, that's also fine. And also, how do you show up? One last example. We hosted an event with Tomorrow Theater. It was the 30th anniversary of Waiting to Exhale. And we hosted this like really cute little like movie night kind of thing. And like the ticket was a little spendier because it included a gift bag that I curated. So like it came with like a little bonnet or a satin pillowcase. It came with like lotion, face mask, and candle, and body scrub. Like it came with a thing. And we didn't sell out, but we sold about 50 tickets, they were really happy. I was really happy, whatever. And this lady comes up and it was like a black woman, and she's like an older black woman. And an older black woman will read you to filth. And so I was scared. I was like, please tell me you're like having a good time. And she was like, this goodie bag is great. She's like, this was worth the price alone. And I was like, that was worth it to her. And she was hanging out with her friends. And I was like, it was worth it alone to you to go see this movie with other black women in this crowd. But also it was worth it for you to like pay a little extra to have a goodie bag and enjoy this. And so that was also the thing too, where it's like, it's worth it so much to be in community and to pay a little extra if you can. Or, we had some white women who were like, we aren't able to go to this event, but they were like, but we want to pay to sponsor someone, like a black woman to go. So they bought a ticket, and we just posted on our chat where we were like, hey, like if the price is a barrier, reach out to us. Some people bought tickets just for this purpose. And that was really kind. And that's also showing up in community. So it's just like all these things that like, there's so many layers of community, and you just have to figure out where in the community you want to be.
Oh, that's just such a good example. We were talking about the power of romance. As a librarian, I can tell you, having been the head of collections at a library a while back, romance is always the #1 genre. It comprises easily 75% of the purchasing budget, without question. And we are having a romance renaissance these days as well, just in the zeitgeist. What do you think somebody who's listening to this episode could take away from something where they're like, I make software or something, and it's like, you can get something out of romance too. Like, as a bookstore owner who sells romance, what would you tell them?
My biggest hot take is, and I don't know if it's actually a hot take, but I always have to frame it this way. I think instead of reading self-help books, you should read a romance, because I think romance gives you communication skills. I think it gives you, and you can be like, dark romance. Like, what are you learning there? And I'm like, you're learning about consent, and you're learning about your boundaries. And that's something you learn about yourself too while you're reading. There's some romances where they're dark and you're like, I actually can't handle this right now. And you know that about yourself. And you know your own boundaries, so that way you could approach other people about your own boundaries. But I think that like for romance, it's one of those things where it's like, it's great at conversation. It's showing you how to relate to other people that you don't look like. I think if you're only reading romances, if you're only reading the popular romances, you're maybe not learning as much because you're learning what, and you know, and I say this as a romance bookstore owner, you're learning usually what people who look like you, which in most of the cases with romance is white people, and you're learning what they feel and what they think. But what else are you going to learn? How do you have conversations about body positivity, about, you know, there's a lot of great romances that have disabled rep. There's a lot of great romances that have queer identity rep. What are you learning and how can you have these conversations with people? Which I think leads to a more open and honest community, open and honest relationship with yourself. I read an Anita Kelly book and I realized that I was queer. And that was huge for me. It was confirmed definitely by that book and also by Love Lies Bleeding, which I saw in the theater. And I was like, I have feelings. But it was like, it gave me a great outlet to be like, this is what I'm learning about myself, and this is how I'm learning about how I can possibly see the world, how I could possibly talk to other people and who are maybe having the same feelings. People want to often see the reflection of themselves in it, which isn't a bad thing, but also it can't stop there. You have to read books by other people. You have to read books by people who don't look like you, who don't act like you, who don't sound like you, but also you have to read books that could potentially make you better in some aspect. And, you know, like you can have a fun little time, a goofy read, whatever, because, you know, books are for everything. Like you should enjoy what you're reading, but you should also take that time to discover the person that you want to be. And like, for me, I love a series, like it's an interconnected standalone series. Like those are my favorite because it's like, you're learning about different viewpoints, but every character is like a similar thing. And that's actually great too, because then you get to see how they relate to other people. You're in their head. How do they relate to the character who was before you? It's like when you read like The Babysitter's Club. You have your main characters, but each book, like the start of the book was always the same, but they're like, here's the backstory from like all these characters. And then you get to see like, you know, Marianne relate in a very different way to Christy. And I think people could be really judgy about romance, which is dumb and also just not interesting. It's just, I don't care. You have a boring viewpoint. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. In that case, I'm like, why do you think it's dumb? Are you thinking it's dumb because mostly women seem to enjoy it? Are you thinking it's dumb because you haven't never had a romance before? In which case, there's books about late bloomers who also, you know, have these conversations. I feel like a lot of people want to project onto it and they want to mock it and they want to think that it's a silly, dumb genre. So they're like, it's silly and dumb, so I'll read sci-fi. And it's like, great, we have sci-fi romances. There's a romance for everything. There's a romance for Shrek. Was that Morning Glory Milking Farm? There's like romance for anything. And that book actually talks a lot about capitalism. So it's like, look at that. Interesting conversations being had. So that's always my thing where I'm like, instead of reading self-help, which don't get me wrong, we have a small fiction, nonfiction section in my store because I love fiction and nonfiction. And I sell a lot of it, even when I'm not selling a romance. But it leads to conversations where it's like, maybe you're not ready to read a full-blown romance, but maybe you're ready to read a novel with a subplot of romance. And then maybe you'll take another step. And then maybe you'll take another step. And then get a lot of customers too, where they feel safe and they come in our store and they admit that they had never read a romance and they want to try. And I'm like, and that's big. As long as you come in with an open mind and the willingness to maybe have a fun time, that's great. We had a husband come in, his wife reads a lot of romance. And I asked him straight up, I was like, well, do you read romance? And he was like, you know, I haven't. And he's like, and I was like, would you be interested in trying one? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, great, you can read this book and talk to her about it. And maybe that's something you guys could have together. You can, you know, act out a scene if you want to. You could talk and like encourage your relationship in a different way. And that's going to do more for you than like, you know, reading the 5 love languages, which men's are always act of service. And I'm like, sir, we know. But yeah, I think that's always my thing. I'm just like, give it a shot, a little smoochy. Never hurts you. And also, if someone who's like, you know, I don't want to read about sex, great. We have romances that don't have sex in them. There's always something in there. And I think my biggest thing is I'm always like, there's a romance for everyone. You just have to be open to the idea of putting yourself out there and maybe falling in love with a book.
I would just like to say that there are plenty of male-oriented thrillers and stuff, and they have some pretty raunchy things in there. But the one thing that they are missing compared to, and I love that you said that people project onto like actual romance, is deeper emotion. And business is emotion. Networking is emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you can't connect with emotions and that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's the problem you're having. So you should go to Grand Gesture and buy yourself a book.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Ask for recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah. We're so good at recommending things. I promise. We're so good at it.
I don't know about you, Megan, but I had a really, really hard time figuring out what were my biggest takeaways because I was like, all of it is my biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
But we pulled out a couple because they were really worth digesting just a little bit longer and making sure that nobody blows by them. We talked about it in the intro about what romance reading specifically can do for you in networking and business. But we also were digesting our notes after Katherine left the studio about how you're showing up in your community, because she made this beautifully put point about, are you, basically acting like a connector? Like, do you come in generously, or are you just taking? And the more you and I started talking about that, we were like, it doesn't mean that somebody is, evil and premeditated and is like, I'm going to take these things. Like, I don't think that's how people naturally operate, because we're humans and we're like, I need this thing right now. And you're thinking about the thing that you need. And you may not realize that you're operating in taking mode instead of two-way street collaborator mode. So I thought it was brilliant. I really recognized and felt very validated as a fellow brick and mortar owner to hear her say those. But I'm wondering for you in your networking experiences, I mean, you're also a super connector, but what do you notice with people when they're not acting like a connector? Like, how do we help people figure out what am I on the spectrum of connecting?
Dinesh talked a lot about listening. I think you can tell when somebody kind of hogs the conversation and just keeps coming back to their work, what they do, them. That makes it very apparent. Or you and I have seen it too around if there's like a heavy hitter in the room and it's the moths to the flame, but they just want something. They don't build a relationship first. Like I said it in the interview, like I have thought about approaching Katherine for something, and I was not just going to send her an email and be like, take my book. It's definitely like, okay, we need to build a relationship here before I can ask something. I think so many people just walk into a room, walk into an event, take it as a given that that thing exists. It is designed for them, and they don't know the effort that went into making it. They don't thank somebody for the time.
What was so interesting was hearing Katherine digest free versus paid events, but also breaking down all the elements and the cost. It's not like we're looking at spreadsheets, although that would be fascinating to do. I'd be like, Katherine, you want to do spreadsheets on YouTube? Never say never. And I really think that there are so many people who've never stepped into the ring before. Even if you considered your gathering or event a flop, or it didn't have as clear purpose or whatever, I think it's valuable for somebody who wants to up their networking game to host something. It could be a lunch for a table of 4, but instead of always relying on the other person to make the reservation and figure out where you're going, it's like, how about in the world of romance kink, maybe you should dom the table. Be a dom. Don't be a sub. Maybe you should tell people what to do, where to be, what to do, and like, what is the plan? What is going on? I think that so many people are used to being told what to do and then find themselves dissatisfied. And it's like, well, actually, in the world of consent, you actually have quite a lot of say in the situation. But, if you're always waiting for someone else to do it, then you end up showing up in a very different capacity. And they want the depth of connection that you get from, ringmaster to ringmaster. And it's like, but you don't get that if you're always circus monkey to ringmaster. So there's such terrible analogous roles, but they're the ones floating through my head. I'm so sorry.
Well, and I think we proved that with this show. You mentioned this theory. It's not, this reality to me. And I think I nodded and was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But the people that we had on the show, without the show, just by going to their event, no, we never could have asked the questions we wanted to ask or made the connections through them that they would have shared if we hadn't come at an equal level.
Correct. Being a host, you are being generous because you are helping somebody else get some more visibility. We all want to have the conversation, but that conversation needs a container, which is the power of podcasting, which is why our business community loves podcasting. But now the visceral experience of doing it, you really get to see, well, this is a fuck ton of work. I still remember, what was that, week 2? And you were like, oh my God, how much more do we have to do? I was like, yep, we're going to do a full premiere week. Buckle up. Many weeks later, you get to see like, oh, I understand. And it's different when you organize. Well, I mean, you and I know that too from hosting our private coffee parties and a happy hour at this point and a failed networking group. But through all those things, like even with the failed networking group, there were still deeper connections to certain people who have access to places and spaces around town that we would not have gotten access to any other way. And it just furthers the collaborations down the road.
To show up in a giving way.
Yes.
that you acknowledge it's a two-way street and you do what you can, sometimes even to give more than the other person is at the
Sometimes
start.
you need to.
For networking, I've been to a few events where I always go twice.
Yeah.
And we made that decision that I am giving more than I am getting, but I don't see that changing. And the ROI is not enough for me to stay and continue coming to this thing.
Yeah.
And that's not directly communicated with them. You know,
No.
you don't have that chat with the host where you're like, this sucks. Peace out. I'm going. But I do think you're kind of having to do that assessment with yourself of like, how am I showing up? What am I giving when I'm here? I'm giving all these connections and nobody's giving me anything in return. They're all really scared. They're not playing on the same level. This is not my sandbox. And I need to take myself to a different sandbox.
This starts to get into our other big point that we kept talking about when we were digesting our notes, the notion of trust and how trust is formed. It's this undercurrent that runs through everything. And people love romance as a genre because the hallmark of romance is a happy ending. There's a resolution at the end. In the end, the bad guy gets what they deserve. The good people get the right things. You're not left with something unresolved. And we like resolution in our brains. It feels emotionally safe and emotionally good. And I think in business, we seek that.
Yeah.
We want a resolution.
Well, in terms of trust too, like if you wouldn't trust somebody to recommend a book to you, are you going to trust them to recommend somebody in their network? Because it starts small, right? Like,
Yeah.
because if you're having those little icebreakers and somebody's, I saw this movie or I read this book, and you go check it out and you're like, oh, they knew me well enough. The next time you see them, you know, you might exchange a movie, you know, and then it builds from there. I think we have to start with first date and it's a book.
Everything comes back to dating.
What's trust? Are they going to leave you somewhere? Are they catfishing you? Are they going to make you pay half the bill? If we want to talk about how romance can help you network, please don't just go out and hit on people.
You and I have seen through the course of the season, the struggle seems to be, how do you break the ice? How do you start the conversation? How do you keep the conversation going? And it's not going to be, here's my offer, here's what I do. It's going to be these things like book recommendations. You and I one time asked a group what their favorite piece of media was that they had consumed, and one of the people was just trying to be different, as people love to be in this area, and was like, well, I don't watch TV anymore. And I was like, oh, it can never work together. I think all the people I've bonded with recently has been over a book or a movie or a TV show. If you haven't been very interesting lately, maybe this is a great excuse. We have talked with so many people about the romance books we read, and it doesn't matter what your gender identity is. People love something entertaining to talk about, even if it's not something that they engage with.
Well, and we should say it landed you a speaking gig.
It did.
It's like when we used to be kids and like you just needed one thing in common and you'd be best friends. I think having an opinion on something that you love is a way to make fans with other people.
You need to go to Grand Gesture, go ask for a recommendation because they're amazing at it. Mm-hmm. Go support a local business.
Yep.
Buy yourself a romance book. You'd be real surprised how happy it will make you.
That's it for today's episode of the Awkward Handshake.
We record at Sasquatch Media Grounds in Vancouver, Washington.
I'm Megan, co-founder of Fatcap Design and creator of PDX Spellbound.
And I'm Mary, founder of Sasquatch Media Grounds and Sensible Woo.
You'll find links to everything we mentioned, guests, resources, and ways to connect with us in the show notes on your favorite podcast platform.
That's also where you'll get updates on where we're headed next and when we're inviting listeners like you to join us for guided networking in person and online.
Don't be passive.
Click the links, pick better rooms. We'll see you there.